Today's episode has been brought to you by Offering Tree. If you don't know Offering Tree, they are an amazing company that is listening to what yoga teachers and studios need. And they've created the best all-in-one software that I know of for wellness professionals. If you're wanting a simple and professional online presence, they will help you with your schedule, booking your classes, taking payments, hosting online videos and resources, Zoom integration, email, and much, much more. Go to offeringtree.com/Shannon for a special podcast listener discount. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, and this podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabeg, Odawa, and Mississauga land, also called the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. If you are new here, you might not know that I'm also a mom of three, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. If you are a returning listener, you know how we roll here. This podcast was created for you, the yoga teacher, so that each and every week you are connected to the information and inspiration that's going to support you as you build your yoga business. Because I get it. Leaving yoga teacher training and jumping out into the world of teaching yoga, running a business, it can feel scary. It can feel like, oh my gosh, do I know what I'm doing? Who else is out there? Who's doing the same stuff as me? And that is what this podcast is for. Also, our Facebook group is there for you. If you have questions right now, you can jump over to our website, theconnectedyogateacher.com, and join the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. Yoga teachers in there are sharing encouragement, helpful tips, and questions all the time. This week on the podcast, we're exploring a topic that I've seen more and more in the yoga world and in our Facebook group. It shows up there as well, but definitely in the yoga world, health and wellness world, what's showing up is diet culture. And this shows up in ways that we might not always see. It can be hidden. Yes, it definitely shows up in deliberate ways and we can see it sometimes. But I want to talk about how it's showing up in ways that we might not even know, because it's causing harm to our yoga students and it can be very dangerous. This is a very important topic for us to talk about as yoga teachers. So I have not just one, but two experts today joining me to give their thoughts and insights. And then also next week on the podcast, we're going to continue this conversation with another yoga teacher, an expert in this topic as well. Today's two guest experts are Elyssa and Jessica. So let me tell you about them and tell you why we're really excited to have them here on the podcast. Elyssa Toomey is a certified eating disorder specialist and supervisor. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist and registered yoga teacher. She is an experienced anti-diet, health at every size informed, weight-inclusive eating disorder dietitian who is very passionate about helping people develop a peaceful relationship, not only with food, but also with their body. She specializes in helping clients heal from chronic dieting, disordered eating, and eating disorders through one-on-one consultation and ongoing group and individual clinic supervision and case consultation. Our other guest is Jessica Grosman, an anti-diet registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, weight-inclusive health practitioner, and yoga teacher. Jessica's mission is to help people get comfortable and connected with their own body through food and yoga. She believes that all people have the right to health regardless of size or medical condition. And she aligns herself as well with the approach of health at every size. She is both a registered dietitian and a yoga teacher, and she's qualified to address and educate on the intersection of food, nutrition, body image, and yoga. See what I mean, connected yoga teachers? These two individuals not only know the yoga world, but they really know this topic so well. Elyssa and Jessica share with me their own take on how we as yoga teachers, and I'm not pointing the finger here because I recognize things that I'm learning along the way too. We as yoga teachers might be contributing to the harm around diet culture in the yoga space and how we can identify this harm and the behaviors and the cues that we might be saying and what we can do about it. We also talk about how we can create safer spaces for all bodies and use yoga as a way to foster connection between body, mind, and breath. And I'm really excited that in today's interview, also what gets highlighted is how beneficial and helpful yoga can be. So when we have this education behind us, today's podcast episode, next week's podcast episode, and also a really exciting workshop that I will tell you more about near the end of today's episode, it really empowers us to help our students and not be causing that harm. Also, we talk about today the role of yoga teachers in disrupting diet culture and when we need to look at referring our students for professional help. I learned so much today in this interview, and I cannot wait to share it with you. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Elyssa and Jessica. It's so great to have you both here today.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here.
Thanks for having us, Shannon.
I'm really excited that we get to dive in and talk about diet culture and how that's showing up in our yoga spaces. But before we get there, tell our listeners, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for? Jessica, do you want to start first?
I would be glad to. I'm Jessica Grosman. I'm a anti-diet registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, weight inclusive health practitioner, and registered yoga teacher. And I have the privilege of being able to work both in the field of nutrition and dietetics, providing medical nutrition therapy to clients, as well as teach yoga to primarily students and clients in the recovery space from eating disorders.
Amazing. It's been so great to connect with you here in real time and where I can see your face because you and I have connected a lot on Instagram. And I'm just really grateful that we get to have this conversation today. Elyssa, tell us about the work that you do and who you do it for.
Certainly. So I am also an anti-diet dietitian and spend the majority of my time doing nutrition counseling for people in terms of helping them to create a peaceful relationship with food and a peaceful relationship with their body. So a majority of my clients do struggle with eating disorders, but I'm also working with people who are trying to get off of the diet cycle, who are really just working on intuitive eating. I've spent the last number of years becoming a certified eating disorder specialist and have my application in to be a certified eating disorder specialist supervisor. So I really have valued working with newer clinicians and helping them, use these tools, whether they're intuitive eating or the embodiment somatic work that I really believe is the answer to helping people to improve that relationship with food and body for the next wave of dietitians, if you will. And I am also a registered yoga teacher.
Okay, so both of you, this is why I'm excited that we get to have this conversation today because you're both in the yoga world and in the anti-diet world and very much certified experts talking to people who are in recovery or dealing with eating disorders. Jessica, do you want to start and tell us where are we seeing diet culture? Sometimes I think that we can't always see it when it's right there and it seems like it's so prevalent in our space. So where are you seeing diet culture show up in yoga right now?
I'm seeing diet culture show up everywhere in yoga. Though before I finish the answer to that, I will say a little bit less so since the pandemic and since yoga classes moved online and the shift out of the studio space, though now things are opening back up. So I'm assuming that that's all going to shift back. But the intersection of diet culture and yoga shows up in places like the choice of clothing being worn in a yoga studio, the cues being given by yoga teachers, the facial expressions, the non-implicit body language, the comparison factor between students, between teachers, even the types of items being sold in yoga studios, for instance, the different types of clothing, the types of foods, the types of body products, it all relates back to diet culture.
Elyssa, where are you seeing this show up? And maybe even some of the things that Jessica listed makes you think of some specific examples.
Yeah, and I think all of those examples are, so clear, not only in the physical yoga space, but also in any sort of yoga branding, right? And this is where I sort of expand to that whole wellness culture idea, right? That diet culture is a piece of this overall wellness culture. And the idea of how sometimes even you can see, kind of yoga for weight loss or yoga for this or yoga for that. And I want to help all of our clients, all of our students, all of your listeners to recognize that it is so pervasive, right? It's in everything that we do. And we think about the industry being a $74 billion industry, and it's the soup that we're swimming in, and it needs to become highlighted for people, because I don't think they even recognize how invasive and pervasive it is until we start to be like, wow, okay, like that is a way that I could, skillfully language this differently. Or this is maybe I don't want to only be serving or selling these sorts of juices in my yoga space. Or I think the other potential problem, and I suspect we'll get to this a little bit more, is also in how individual yoga teachers speak about their relationship with food and their relationship with their body, which also can be problematic, because we all know as teachers, there is this level of maybe respect that our students have for us, or they're looking to us for, direction, not only the physical direction of where to place your feet on the mat, but also sort of that bigger life direction. And if we are perpetuating our own ideas of what we're doing around food and body, that can be dangerous.
Can you both think of an example of something that you might have heard in a yoga class, or you've heard someone talk about in a yoga class, with regards to something that might seem really subtle, but eventually or potentially would be harmful for a yoga student? Kind of explain that. Jessica, do you have one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think my immediate answer is a teacher saying, you can't eat this or that before practicing yoga, or if you eat such and such a food, and I'm purposely not saying what these foods would be, what a teacher would say, but if you eat that, you're not a quote unquote good yogi. And that is just, very simple but very blatant. And I think at this point, I also want to make sure that we acknowledge that the scope of practice for a yoga teacher does not include anything related to food, diet, or nutrition. So anytime a yoga teacher makes a comment about food, diet, or nutrition, they are not within yoga lines, the scope of practice for a yoga teacher.
Right. Elyssa, what do you think? Any examples pop into your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think will often hear people talking, and it sometimes feels like it's more like the before or after class kind of stuff, not necessarily the stuff in class. Now, that does, of course, come up, right? When someone's doing core work and maybe they're talking about how this is going to change someone's body shape and size so that it can be, manipulated in the way that the Eurocentric beauty standard would want us to look. But I think it's often more of the way that a yoga teacher might show up with and I am going to specifically say, like, their sort of green juice, or they're talking about. And listen, a green juice can be delicious, but it's not a meal. And that's, I think, some of this idea is like we see a microcosm of what is happening in the day of that yoga teacher. And you have no idea, what they've eaten through the day, how much they've eaten, how they're taking care of themselves. But we as humans, when we don't know all of the answers, we create our own stories and we ascribe meaning. And so, unfortunately, we can potentially create a narrative in our own head that says, like, oh, in order to be a good yogi, I have to drink only green juice. And that's where I see it showing up, as a specific example.
This is such a good example. Thank you, both of you, for bringing this forward. This past week, I was eating a cinnamon roll, and I was in a space where I'm not even in a yoga space, and someone said to me, "I didn't think you eat sweets." And I was like, "I eat anything I want." And they're like, "I thought you ate healthy." I was like, "This feels really healthy to me. Like this feels," and I rail against the whole like healthy idea. And I love to shake that up out in the world because I've learned about diet culture and how it shows up. It's still there. I feel like it's still there in me. It's still there. I make judgments about food and about my body. It's still a work in progress. I wouldn't say I have it all figured out, but I do like to disrupt. So I'd love to ask, what do we do if we're yoga teachers? We're not registered dietitians. We have no training in eating disorders. We don't have the training to be talking about food. What do we do when someone shows up to class and they're like, "I really want to, be thinner or be more fit or change my body in some way?" What do we do when someone shows up and that's their focus? Jessica, do you want to touch on what you think would be helpful?
I'm going to throw it to Elyssa first because I think she more eloquently will answer this. But what I want to say to you before she does, Shannon, is one way to stop people dead in their tracks if they make a comment about you or the cinnamon roll is to flip the question and say, "What is healthy to you?" Or how do you define health? Because it stops people in their tracks. Nobody considers what the meaning of health is. They just assume that they want to be healthy, or what they're eating is healthy, or that practicing yoga is healthy. But what is healthy? And what is health?
Exactly. I can tell you, me eating a cinnamon roll feels really amazing.
And, jumping off of that, I think that is part of the work. And we'll circle back to your question, but like when I'm working with a client and I'm talking to them about all the reasons that we eat, right? Energy, nutrients are just a small piece of it, right? We're also eating for pleasure. We're also eating for comfort. We're also eating for social connection, right? So, the Easter and Passover holidays are a week away. And when we think about those holidays, there are specific foods that if they weren't on the table, we would all be disappointed in, right? And I think that's such a beautiful way to think about food as so much more than just energy. And there are times throughout our day and throughout our week and throughout our life that there's going to be a shift, right? On a Tuesday morning, my breakfast is much more about like energy to get me, to my next meal or snack. Whereas on a Saturday night, my meal is probably going to be hopefully more about pleasure and connection, right? And so we recognize that it plays all roles, but specifically someone with an eating disorder, them eating that cinnamon roll that you're talking about, that is health. Because if they can do that in a way where there aren't thoughts or judgments or guilt, that is a beautiful definition of health.
So, Elyssa, what do you think we do when that yoga student then shows up and their focus is in some way modifying their body? Because let's just call it out, because society tells us, a certain body shape is better, or, having more muscle is better, whatever it is. What do we do when they show up and they have these goals?
Yeah. And I think this for sure becomes complicated because as registered dietitians, right, Jessica and I have so much, thankfully, so much training in ways to talk with people, in terms of motivational interviewing and other tools that we've been lucky enough to learn. And I recognize that not every yoga teacher is going to have that level of education and training. But I think we can try to connect with people as humans and sort of begin to ask people to get curious about why they want what they're seeking and to help people to recognize that our worth as individuals has nothing to do with our weight and has nothing to do with our size and has nothing to do with our ability to kick up and to handstand in the middle of the room, right? That we can begin to help people to expand the view of what it means to be embodied, to what it means to be well. And I sometimes shy away from the word healthy because it does unfortunately have that negative diet culture link to it. So I would talk with people about like their overall well-being and what it is that they're looking for. Because whether it's nutrition or whether it is their movement, even their yoga, it's only one piece of the big puzzle. And so we want to help people to see all of that, to see that social connection, to see that sleep, to see that, managing their mental health. All of these things are part of what makes someone healthy and well, and helping people to sort of really just broaden that view, I think can be helpful.
Is there anything that you would add to that, Jessica?
I would add the piece that any body and every body can practice yoga, that there is yoga beyond asana, that engaging in conversation where you're present, where your body, your mind, your breath are in that present moment, that is yoga. It's not all about asana, and we all have that ability to connect. And isn't that what it's all about? Yoga, to connect, to yoke. So, removing yoga from diet culture, wellness culture, has profound effects on people, we see, because it's more than just the physical practice and getting back to the full scope of a yogic life.
So good. I want to call attention to, I think, are both of you putting a workshop together for yoga teachers based on this? Yes. Tell us like where we would find the information for that, because I feel like the key to all of this is probably more education. Like when that student comes up and says something to us and we're thinking, how do I answer this? Or how do I sort of see this in the health and wellness spaces? So I know I'm kind of putting you in the spot here of when is the workshop, and tell me the information, but it would be great if you could share that.
So, Elyssa and I have proposed and written a workshop for Yoga for Eating Disorders, which is an amazing online resource. I serve as a faculty member of Yoga for Eating Disorders and teach online classes for their community. And actually, that's how Elyssa and I met, as in the professional realm of in training with the organization. But we are putting together a training called Blurred Lines, exploring the intersection of diet culture and yoga, because we realize that these are issues that have intersection, that are complicated, that aren't cut and dry. And there's a lot of confusion. And we both feel very passionately about scope of practice as both registered dietitians and as yoga teachers, and making sure that we stay in our lane appropriately. And not only that we stay in our lane, but that our fellow yoga teachers, our fellow registered dietitians honor their education and their path as professionals and not step over the line, because that's where the harm happens.
That's amazing. I'm so excited that you're offering this to yoga teachers. Connected yoga teachers, I have some really exciting news. Elyssa and Jessica will be offering this workshop again, and we are going to host it. So we talked a while back and they had a workshop, but now we are going to be offering one so that you can attend. So it's happening November the 3rd. And yes, there's a replay if you cannot attend live. And this really is a training that I hope all yoga teachers take. Honestly, it can be life-saving to have this education for your students. And most of all, I hope that yoga teachers can learn in today's podcast episode and also in the training how we can learn more and not cause harm with regards to talking about food and talking about bodies. So I will make sure to link to that workshop in our show notes, or you can head over to theconnectedyogateacher.com/anti-diet. So anti-diet is all one word. There's no dash in it. That's theconnectedyogateacher.com/anti-diet to find out more or to register.
I think what is so wonderful to think about and one of the things that we intend to cover in that workshop, and we're happy to talk about that here as well, is like, as yoga teachers, we have so many amazing tools in our toolkit that is appropriate, that is within our scope of practice to help people to do the work that we're talking about. So we want to also highlight the positives and the things that we are capable of in terms of breath work, in terms of really any of the somatic embodiment practices that the 8 limbs of yoga do offer us. And so many of them can be really transformative and incredibly beneficial for anyone who's working on their relationship with food and body, right? It doesn't, as you said, Shannon, that's something that you're still, working on. And I think all of us as humans are working on it because, again, we are like bombarded, right? From the time that we are so young. I often use Disney characters to talk about from our earliest times, we are sort of shown, right, what is, quote unquote, what is the right body to have. And that if we have this body, then that equals happiness and it equals success and it equals love and it equals all these things. And so we know intellectually that that's not the case, but it's through getting, it's getting into our body. And that's what yoga offers us, all of the different aspects of it to help us to feel the difference and to recognize that our bodies are to be lived in and not looked at.
This is so good. I have friends who are in recovery, friends who have dealt with eating disorders, especially in the yoga world. It's very prevalent. Friends who also counsel people who have eating disorders in various ways, counseling, registered dietitians like both of you. And there are so many tools, like you said, that our yoga can offer to people. And I felt that in my own body. Like I just feel much more at home in my body. And that wellness piece that you were talking about really feels like it's there. So I'm excited that it's not all like, don't do this as a yoga teacher. It's more like, how can we also be of service and help people? What do we do when we see something? This happens constantly to me. I'm scrolling or I'm reading. I go to search something for a yoga blog or whatever, and all of a sudden there are words that are popping out at me, and I think, why are we doing this? Or what do I do when I see this? Let's say one of the most common things is I'll go to let's say an article on a yoga website, and it's telling me how I should be eating and how I should be exercising more. And I can see it so clearly. This is diet culture showing up in the health and wellness space. What do I do? Do I, contact the people that have the blog? Do I write a nasty comment? What do you think we should be doing as yoga teachers as we learn and we see this? Jessica, do you want to start first?
I would say as you mentioned, you're going to see this everywhere. It's clickbait, right? Everybody's looking for for the easy answer and easy solution. And it's something that Elyssa and I see all the time with our clients. They just want an easy fix, an easy solution, a magic pill. And we know that's not realistic and that's not going to happen. So when I see stuff, yeah, sure, I get riled up and I get upset. But that's my opportunity either to not share this, so not allow this information to proliferate, but to think about, yes, contacting who posted this, or to write a article, a reply that gives correct information, even to get in touch with whoever shared the information and say, can you provide a credible source for this information? Or would you like to use me as a credible source, as an expert in nutrition, as a registered dietitian? I think that it's important to recognize that anybody can have an opinion about any subject, but opinions are not facts and opinions are not knowledge. And so we wouldn't want to go to, say, somebody who has an opinion about heart health if we had some serious, medical complication with our heart. We wouldn't want to see somebody that has an opinion about heart health. We want to go to a cardiologist. But what we see very frequently is somebody that has an opinion, a specific opinion about food, about diet, about nutrition, about a way of living that is not supported by science, not supported by education. And those are the voices, unfortunately, that get amplified and cause, or have the ability to cause, so much harm.
That's such a good analogy. We wouldn't want someone with opinions about heart health. We want to go to the expert. This is so good. Elyssa, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of we could have an hour-long separate conversation about the pros and cons of social media, for example, right? But one of the concerning things is certainly in terms of Instagram and TikTok is so many of the influencers who are like, eat this, exercise like me, and you'll look like me. And unfortunately, as Jessica said, people are looking for that sort of like solution, right? Because we believe that we should be looking a certain way, or should always be working on looking a certain way. And so when we recognize that that's coming up all the time, we're not necessarily going to be able to shut down that particular person who is posting in that way. But we can also do our own work to lead people and highlight people who are doing really good work in the world around this intersection of what well-being really means. And for some people, it is really important to look at all the different ways that diet culture is showing up from all the different places, whether that is that figuring out how that Eurocentric beauty standard is probably not in line if they really begin to dig into it, right? In terms of how it is racist, how it is patriarchal, how it is ageist, how it is ableist, how it is homophobic, and transphobic, and all of those things. Because my guess is, and I maybe this is a little bit of my naive positive spin, my guess is most people become yoga teachers because they care, because they want to serve, because they want people to find that peace in their body, right? Likely is they found benefits of their yoga practice in their life, and they want to be able to share that with other people. And so if we highlight all the ways that diet culture is in contrast to that, then that is often an illuminating way in to help sort of change the discourse.
Yeah, that is amazing. How do we make sure, like, what are some of the things that you're thinking of in terms of how do we make sure that we are taking care of our students? Like you said, we want to. Our listeners are learning as we go. We have some other podcasts about the harm that can be caused around language around and with regards to eating disorders, and we can link to those in the show notes. But are there some ideas that you have of how we can create a safer space for all of our students? Jessica, do you want to start with that question?
And we can, create safe places by having a welcoming environment, by removing leveling from classes, by, honoring all body shapes and sizes and abilities, not labeling a class as beginner or advanced, and teaching to everyone, which is easier said than done. I recognize that. We can go as far as making classes accessible in terms of pricing, making an equitable price so that people of all spheres, all places within the community can participate. So we see diversity within the yoga studio, because a safe space is in my opinion, a diverse place. It's not where you only look like the person on the mat next to you, because that's not how the world works. We live in a world where everybody is different and everybody is unique. And so if we're in a yoga studio where everybody looks the same and has the same sort of practice, what are we gaining? We're not gaining safety. We're gaining just a mirror image of ourselves.
That is such a good point. And I wasn't even thinking of that when I was thinking of like this safer space, how diversity can really add to that. We recently had a post in our Facebook group, and I had shared how friends of mine were kicked out of a yoga class. At some point, I'm going to bring it onto the podcast. Connected yoga teachers, a quick update before I go into another question. The podcast where I talked about my friends being kicked out of a yoga class, along with stories from others who were kicked out, it's ready for you now. And I will make sure that I link to this in the show notes. It definitely has gone a long way in conversations. It comes up a lot in podcast episodes. It really stuck with people. So we'll link to that in the show notes. I was shocked to see that some people had been told, like, you won't be able to do this. You're in a body that is too old, too large, not flexible enough. And I think this is a really important point, that this isn't just around the size of our body. Like we really need to look at how we can make yoga more accessible, for sure. Elyssa, what are your thoughts on creating safer spaces for all bodies?
Yeah, I think, everything that Jessica said, and I would also say, like, even in our languaging around different variations of a pose, right? That one is not a more advanced variation of a pose. It's just a different variation of a pose. And as the yoga teacher, even if you are the person who can take it right to that quote unquote advanced right level, that you don't always have to model that, right? You can model every variation of a pose. You can be very purposeful in using props, in helping people to recognize that props, are beneficial for all of us, not just the people who, right, can't quote unquote do the poses in that way. So I think that is a piece of it. I certainly think that also in terms of safety, like thinking about lighting and thinking about, the kinds of things that are in that space, whether it's plants or other things, so that it feels welcoming and warm, and being very clear that people ought to feel empowered and that they have autonomy to do with their body what feels right. And that what feels right today might be very different than what felt right yesterday, and being very forthright to say, and that's all good, right? Because again, yoga is not just about the asana. It is so much more than that. And honoring yourself and being connected to yourself and what's best for you in that moment truly is what yoga is, right? We all recognize that we practice on our mat so that we can take it off our mat and live our best lives. And so we want to really be encouraging of that.
Hey, connected yoga teachers, I'm jumping in here quick to share a teaching tip with you. Today, I'm planning a class that is all about bowel health and yoga. Now, when it comes to all things pelvic health, I have so much information swimming around in my brain that I want to share, but I also want people to just be in the experience, their own experience of breath, movement, awareness. I don't want to be talking too much or just trying to cram all kinds of information at them in a way that's distracting. And I know that this is one key thing that I need to work on as a yoga teacher. So one way that I do this is I make a rule with myself, and I make sure that I stick to this. I write down 3 key points I want to highlight during the class. And I put these on sticky notes. And generally what happens is I come up with more than 3. Sometimes I come up with like 5 or 6, even though I'm telling myself, no, it has to be the top 3 things. And sometimes I even get really sneaky and I did this week. I tried to put 2 things on one sticky note. I was like, well, I might have time to talk about both of those things. So once I have them all written out on the sticky notes, then I pare them down so that I only have 3 left. And that's the tricky part for me. But it's worth it, connected yoga teachers. If you feel like you're doing a lot of talking in your yoga classes, you have a lot to share with your yoga students, drill it down and see what are the key 3 things. If people walked out of this class today, what would I want them to remember? Then I see where those 3 things fit the best in the class. I like to weave them in, and for me, that feels easy. So, for example, I knew that I wanted to talk about variations of squatting, and then what I wanted to talk about is how beneficial this can be for our bowel health. So, another easy part when I'm planning out all of these classes is that I don't have to think about how online students are going to get their Zoom links. It's all automatic. Just this week, someone signed up for my 6-week session, and we're at week 5 as I'm recording this. And it's all okay though, because I use Offering Tree for my registrations. So while I'm planning the class and doing my sticky note trick, this person signs up, paid, and the Zoom link just goes out to them automatically with a reminder email, a text reminder as well. So I can worry about my class planning and trying to stick to these 3 key points and not even think about the tech side of things, or if someone is going to get that Zoom link or an email reminder. If you're not using Offering Tree yet, make sure to check it out if this sounds like something you need to have in your business. It's a yoga teacher's best assistant. It makes so many things automatic, and also we have a discount code for you. Head over to offeringtree.com/Shannon to grab that. Now let's get back to our conversation with Elyssa and Jessica. As we close out here, I want to touch on what do we do when we get to the point where we think maybe this yoga student, like they're coming to you with questions about diet and food and body image. And we get to the point where we're like, you know what? I think based on my knowledge, this person could use help from a registered dietitian who has education around eating disorders. How do we refer that person, or when do we know when we refer that person? And how do we know the person we're referring them to is someone who will help them? Jessica, what do you tell yoga teachers around this?
Well, I would tell a yoga teacher, and I do tell yoga teachers, to trust their gut instinct, first of all. If they think that there is a situation that needs to be addressed, not to wait, because your first instinct upon looking at somebody, and I want to point out that that eating disorders and disordered eating does not discriminate. All shapes and sizes of bodies can experience, suffer, and be wrapped up with disordered eating and eating disorder. So it's not the size of a body, but oftentimes more like thinking about or hearing thoughts, behavior, expressions, and to not wait, to find a way to gently say to your student, I'm concerned about you. because oftentimes somebody that's exhibiting this behavior is really crying out for attention. They are looking for somebody to notice that they need help. So I don't think that waiting till something um, more dire happens is the way to go. So as a teacher though, to have the tools, the ability to refer out to a professional, to know that there are others in the community that work specifically with eating disorders, disordered eating, mental health is important because yoga teachers are not that professional. So to know your abilities and know your scope of practice as a yoga teacher, know that you can't do it all and that there is a limit to your work as a yoga teacher is first and foremost.
So good. Elyssa, how do we know who we're referring this person to? Like, how do we build that referral?
Yeah, and I think, for the brand new yoga teacher who is like excited to teach their own class, we recognize that this is a big ask to sort of have that kind of referral list at the ready. So certainly if you are the owner of a studio, I think that maybe there's a higher, bar to be set there in terms of the same way, we would want people to know like who would be a good physical therapist to refer someone to, right? I feel like an anti-diet dietitian should be on that list of people that you've identified as a potential, referral for someone. And so there are lots of, this is again one of the positives of social media is that a lot of Facebook communities that are weight inclusive will have groups that are local to the area, right? I'm part of one for the state of New Jersey, and it's open to all sort of health and wellness practitioners who work in the weight inclusive space. And that can be, a tool in beginning to investigate. Certainly there are, many online ways that you could help to identify whether someone is doing right the kind of work that we would want them to be doing around anti-diet eating disorders, intuitive eating, that could be identified. So Jessica mentioned that she is an intuitive eating certified counselor. So she's gone through that training, right? I'm a certified eating disorder specialist. And I know it's a little bit of alphabet soup in there, but, people can begin to pretty quickly assess, like, is this person, trained in the way that I would want someone to be trained. And, I think oftentimes too, our students might already kind of know what's out there because if they are struggling, they've probably done some of their own work. And sometimes it just takes another caring person to say, hey, I notice that you show up all the time, even when you're injured, even when you're, definitely squeezing this in a time in your life where maybe like resting would be better or, whatever kind of the indications are that you're noticing. And building that rapport with your clients so you can have those conversations with them and saying, maybe I don't know all the answers, but I'm willing to help you to find those answers.
That's amazing. I really am glad that you called out social media in this. I feel like if our listeners went and followed your social media, both of you, they could see some examples. I know, like I said, that's how I found Jessica was on Instagram. And through that, Jessica will share a post. And I'm like, yes, like I love that one. And then I'll look, okay, where is that shared from? And we can really get some new ideas that really shake up the way we probably have been programmed throughout our lives up to this point around body image and diet culture and especially how it's showing up in our yoga spaces. So I'm excited that we continue to learn this together. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our yoga teachers? Anything that you wish that they kind of thought of or knew? Jessica, do you have anything that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I would say just to reach out and to be in touch with myself and Elyssa and take the guessing game out of social media as much as Elyssa said to, look for accounts, look for people that are doing the work that is common to our work or that we support, but also to reach out to us and know that we can be a resource as we are connected with other professionals in our space across the country. The anti-diet dietitian world is unfortunately not as big as we would like it to be. And the group of us that are both registered dietitians and yoga teachers is even a smaller pool. So we are, able to be in touch with others and to connect anybody that comes to us with an appropriate professional. And that, I really enjoy that personal connection and making contact and engaging in conversation with somebody and referring them to resources that are appropriate and, feel very comfortable being the conduit. And I, think Elyssa feels similarly. So we welcome anybody to reach out to us. And we'll help point people in the right direction if that is what is necessary.
Thank you so much for offering that. Elyssa, is there anything that you'd like to share as we close things out here?
Yeah, and I will echo that. I agree. We are a small group, but I like to say we're a small and mighty group, right? We're all very passionate, or at least I've been so lucky to meet so many other dietitians in this anti-diet world and dietitians and yoga teachers in this world who really, are wanting to be of service and wanting to dismantle this diet culture. I mean, I really feel like, for both Jessica and I, we believe this is our dharma. This is why, we are doing the work that we're doing in the world. And it goes well beyond my work. This is really, sort of my passion in the world. And so I love connecting with people and helping people to find the right resources. And I would say, again, going back to what, as a yoga teacher, reminding yourself of what the benefits that you've received from this practice. Where can we show up for our students in the way that we've shown up for ourselves? How has the breath helped us? How have the poses helped us? How have the yamas and the niyamas helped us, right? And really thinking about how we can use all of those beautiful tools to continue to help people to create that safe space for themselves in their bodies.
That's amazing. Thank you. Jessica, how should people connect with you? Is there one spot that is better over other spots, like website, Instagram? Where's the best spot to connect with you?
Either Instagram or my website. So on Instagram, I'm at With Health and Gratitude, and my website is withhealthandgratitude.com.
All right. We'll link to both those in our show notes. Elyssa, what about you? Where should we find you?
The easiest place for me is probably on Instagram, Elyssa Toomey, RDN. And I just, I really welcome it. I think I am not someone who posts a lot. I'll be perfectly honest, right? My social media game is not great. But I do love connecting with people. And as we said, can help really direct people towards getting the services that they need. Because as Jessica said, what was implied in what Jessica said is the sooner that we can help people, especially if this is someone who's struggling with disordered eating or an eating disorder, what we know from the research is the better the recovery will be for someone. So again, trust your, Jessica said, right, trust your gut. I would say trust your spidey sense, and and be open with people, because ultimately what we know is that people just want to be seen and they want to be heard and they want to be validated. And so even if you're not totally on board, maybe what you're sensing is not totally correct, but that's okay, right? Better to err on that side of connection and, compassion than questioning, oh, I should have said something.
Yeah. It's definitely can be a life-saving thing when individuals get the help that they need. So thank you both so much for your time today and for the work that you're doing in the world, really breaking down the the misinformation, the diet culture that is seeping into our yoga world, and really pointing it out. It makes a big difference. And I'm looking forward to our yoga teachers learning more from both of you. So thank you for this today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. This was such an honor.
Oh my goodness, connected yoga teachers. I am so grateful for you being here. I'm also so grateful for the time that Jessica and Elyssa took to talk to all of us today about this important topic. And I want to share how much I'm still learning. I'm still learning about my own language, my own internal thoughts about bodies and food. It's been so ingrained in my culture and my upbringing anyway that I feel like it's an important thing for all of us as humans to look at. Now, we are coming up to our Canadian Thanksgiving is this month. It's always in October. I know you American listeners, you have your Thanksgiving in November, but we have ours earlier here in Canada. And one key takeaway, not really key takeaway from this episode, but one key takeaway that I learned as I was supporting a really close friend and yoga teacher who was dealing with a life-threatening disordered eating issue was to take away all talking about both people's body size and shape and also what they're eating. So as you gather for Thanksgiving, if you are in October or November, or when you gather with family for your next meal, see what it feels like to take away all conversation about what someone has on their plate or doesn't have on their plate, and also any comments or judgment around food or body size. I know from growing up that I would hear family members say, "Oh, you look so great," and then make a comment about someone's body image or body size. And so what if we took all of those away? And there are lots of other things for us to be talking about. Maybe ask questions about, what was the most exciting thing that has happened to you this month or this year or this week? Make it more about that and less about the very ingrained. And notice also the comments that you hear from other people. Sometimes I step in, sometimes I just notice. And I think we can all keep this in mind out in the world, but definitely in our yoga spaces. I would love to hear from you, connected yoga teachers. What are your questions? What are your thoughts? Where are you seeing this show up in the yoga world? I also want to link back to a previous episode that we did with Tabitha Farrar a long time ago around eating disorder education for yoga teachers. If you are brand new to this and you want to learn a little bit more, that's another great episode that goes along with it. And come to the training with Jessica and Elyssa and myself. I'm going to be there hosting and learning right along with you. Again, that workshop is November the 3rd. It's called Blurred Lines, the Harmful Intersection of Diet Culture and Yoga. And it's for yoga teachers or movement educators. And what I love is that Jessica and Elyssa are both yoga teachers who are also registered dietitians, and they are educated in disordered eating and eating disorders. So to sign up for that workshop, head on over to theconnectedyogateacher.com/anti-diet or go to the show notes page and find it there. Our show notes page for today's episode is over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/292. Also, I have some things coming up. So over in our Pelvic Health Professionals membership, my 6-week Yoga for Pelvic Health series is available. It's now on demand. So the replays of all of our classes are there and ready for you. I covered breath, hip pain, pelvic floor, bladder, bowel health, and uterus health. And I love hearing the feedback from our members, but also other people who took the classes are really telling me how much they loved the classes and how much they learned in those classes. We also have some great guest experts coming in to talk about topics like pelvic floor hypertension, hypermobility and pelvic health, and also yoga for menopause. And October 24th, which is coming up soon, I have a yoga for pelvic health workshop that I'm doing. So this goes along so well with the 6-week series I was just telling you about. It's a 3.5-hour workshop, and I'm going to cover the basic pelvic health information that I hope all yoga teachers understand and know, because we're teaching to people who have a pelvis. So hopefully we know how that whole part of the body works. To join all of these calls, to get access to the Yoga for Pelvic Health workshop, as well as the 6-week Yoga for Pelvic Health series, go over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com and you can join the membership and get access to all of that. Or you can pick and choose. If you just wanted to take the workshop, you could do that. If you just wanted to take the 6-week Yoga for Pelvic Health series, but trust me, I'll tell you right now that the best deal, I'm always looking for the best deal, is to join the membership and then you get access to everything. Next week on the podcast, I am really excited that Vivian Sellis is going to be here talking about eating disorder recovery and yoga. I will see you back here for that talk. Thank you for being here today, for learning, for being here all the way to the end. You make this podcast possible, dear listener. Also, huge shout out to our team over here, our audio engineer, Suzanne, our traveling writer, Crunch, and our community support manager, Sinead. Thank you so much for all that you do behind the scenes to make this podcast happen, but also to make our community a place that really feels helpful, inviting, like a great place to hang out. And, the perspectives that our team has are just amazing. I love learning from them and love hearing about the things that they are doing out in the world, even beyond this podcast. Alrighty, maybe you know what I'm going to ask already, because I like to leave you with this each and every week. What will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?